The helicopter dropped so low, it nearly shaved the grass off my land. Dust slammed into me, stakes ripped out of the ground, and then this heavy-set woman in a tight black suit waddled out like she owned the sky. Her jacket strained across her stomach, her cheeks flushed, and she was already breathing in sharp, angry bursts. "Stop right now," she shouted, shoving a federal cease and desist inches from my face. "This isn't your property. You're trespassing." But as her papers shook in the rotor wash, something else caught my eye. Across the far ridge, a second helicopter hovered, silently watching us. And it wasn't federal. She didn't wait for the rotors to slow. The heavy-set woman marched toward me like a battering ram in heels, her suit jacket riding up every few steps as she huffed through the dust. "Fiona Kellerman," she barked, flashing a badge and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Chief Legal Officer for Wind River Resources. And you're done here." She snapped her fingers, an actual HOA Karen snap, expecting compliance. The cease and desist fluttered in her hand, choked between plump fingers, straining against gold rings. I didn't move. Maybe because I'd spent 12 burned-out years in the oil fields, or because 5 years ago my father died alone fixing the fence line just over that ridge, the same land he left me, the only solid thing I had left. He'd told me once right before he passed, "If anyone ever asks about this land, don't trust them." Watching Fiona glare up at me, sweating, breathing hard, acting like she owned the horizon, I finally understood the edge in his voice. She leaned closer, her perfume thick and sour under the heat. "There are complications with your deed," she said. "Legal ones. Serious ones." Then she smiled, wide, smug, victorious. And behind her dust, trails rose from the northern boundary. Someone else was already coming. By the time Fiona's helicopter lifted off, the dust hadn't even settled before the silence felt wrong. I drove straight to the cabin, grabbed the box of my father's papers, and spread everything across the table: tax records, old maps, the deed. That's when I found the sealed envelope with his handwriting. "Only open if someone asks about the land." Before I could tear it open, headlights swept across the window. I stepped outside. A dark SUV idled at the far edge of my property, engine humming, lights off, except for a single beam aimed straight at my survey stakes. The vehicle sat there for almost a full minute, long enough to let me know it wasn't lost, before rolling away slow, deliberate, like it was tracing a boundary of its own. Back inside, my phone buzzed. Monroe, my father's old attorney, sounded shaken. "Cole, Wind River tried to take this land once before, 15 years ago. Your father shut it down. Whatever they're doing now, it's not new." I looked out toward the ridgeline again. Another light blinked. Same SUV, same slow pattern. They weren't just watching, they were measuring. The next morning, I met Monroe at the county clerk's office. He pulled an old case file like he was lifting a coffin lid. Wind River had filed a quiet title action against my father in 2008. Dismissed but sealed. Sealed meant someone had something worth hiding. When I drove back home, fresh tire tracks cut straight across my property, over my boundary, through my grass, and right up to the ridge I'd been surveying. Whoever it was didn't even bother pretending anymore. I climbed the ridge. Footprints, big ones, headed toward a rock outcrop where soil sampling holes had been drilled. Recent. Precise. They weren't surveying federal land. They were surveying mine. As I snapped photos, my phone dinged. Delaney Grant, former Intel, the only investigator I trusted, replied in minutes. "Send me everything. If Wind River is moving this fast, they're hiding something big." Before sunset, the SUV returned. This time, it didn't keep its distance. It crept to within 200 yards, paused, then someone inside took a flash photo of my cabin. A line had officially been crossed. They weren't pretending. They were claiming. Harold Pierce's voice shook as he told me the truth. "The land was yours. Always was," he whispered. "They made me redo the survey until it wasn't." He looked broken, a man who had carried guilt for decades. But his confession confirmed what my father had hinted at his entire life. Someone wanted the ground under our feet badly enough to rewrite maps. When I got back to the cabin, the front door hung sideways, hinges splintered. Inside looked like a tornado had been trapped, and angry drawers dumped furniture, flipped cushions sliced open. They took my laptop. They took every folder except what I'd carried with me. But nothing was stolen. Everything was searched. On the wall, someone had dragged a muddy hand across the wood like a signature. A message: "We were here." I called the sheriff. The deputy shrugged, took photos, suggested kids messing around. He didn't write down half of what I told him. Outside, the wind had covered most footprints, but the tire marks were unmistakable, the same SUV. That night I opened my father's sealed envelope. Inside was a federal agreement he'd kept hidden for nearly 40 years. and a handwritten warning. If they come asking again, do not let them take it. I refused to let them pick the battlefield. I filed to speak at the next county commission meeting. Monroe warned me it was risky, but I needed witnesses, public ones. When my name was called, half the room turned. The other half was already watching her. Fiona sat in the back, squeezed into a wooden chair that groaned under her weight, arms crossed over her, two tight suit lips, curled like she smelled something beneath her. I held up the 1,985 agreement. The federal government admitted their mistake and granted my family ownership in perpetuity, I said. Wind River is trespassing, surveying, breaking into my home, and bribing officials to rewrite history. Commissioner Virgil Cormarmac slammed his gavel so hard the mic popped. You are out of order. These conspiracy claims end now. He looked at Fiona, and she gave the slightest nod, the kind that told me everything was orchestrated long before I stepped into this room. 2 days later, the local paper ran a smear piece, calling me unstable, financially, desperate, possibly dangerous. I wasn't losing just my land now. They were coming for my credibility. Delaney called at 4 a.m., voice razor sharp. Cole, I found the money. $50,000 routed from a Cayman shell company to a political PAC Cormarmac's PAC. Dates matched perfectly with Wind River permit approvals. There were emails too, Fiona instructing staff to neutralize local resistance. And worse. Delaney pulled surveillance logs. My father's land had been monitored for 3 weeks before he died. Same model SUV. Same security firm. Same pattern circling the boundary. That wasn't BLM, Delaney said quietly. That was private contractors. Someone wanted him pressured. Or gone. The next morning I flew to Arizona to meet Everett Thornton, the retired BLM deputy director whose name signed my father's secret agreement. The old man looked sick when I told him everything. I tried to protect him, he said. The government gave away land worth millions by mistake. Your father was supposed to keep it quiet. When he called me in 2019 scared, I knew someone else had discovered the deposits. He looked me dead in the eye. Your father didn't just die. He was removed as an obstacle. By the time I drove back from the airport, I'd already made my decision. If they wanted a war, fine. I'd take all of them to federal court and bury every last one. The limestone courthouse loomed like a fortress. Cameras lined the back row, ranchers in dusty hats shuffled to front seats, and a handful of activists whispered in corners. Fiona Kellerman sat with her legal team, dark suits, leather briefcases, posture perfect. The air smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. Judge Huxley entered sharp at 9 a.m., glasses on chain eyes, scanning everyone like a surgeon. Quiet title, defamation, and conspiracy, she read. We start with quiet title. I stepped to the podium folder, clutched tight. Heart thumping like a jackhammer, I ignored Fiona's calculating stare. My family has owned 640 acres in Section 12 since 1952. I began, voice steady. My father lived here for 37 years, paid taxes, maintained the land. Wind River Resources claims this land isn't mine, claims it belongs to the federal government. That claim is false. I slapped the 1,985 agreement onto the desk. The signature of Everett Thornton BLM, deputy director at the time, glared back at everyone. The room went silent. Fiona's cheeks flushed under the courtroom, lights her breathing audible. She tried to suppress a cough, a minor crack in the armor she thought impenetrable. From the back, cameras flashed. Ranchers leaned forward. Even the judge's gaze sharpened. Somewhere behind Fiona, I glimpsed at a folder of financial transfers, surveillance logs, emails, all waiting for Layer 2. Ramona walked to the front. She didn't need notes. Mr. Thornton is here to testify, she said, voice like steel. He signed the 1,985 agreement. It is legal and binding. Thornton limped to the stand, frail but steady. I signed in good faith, he said. The Branson family upheld their end. The BLM did too, until now. Harold Pierce, the surveyor, wheeled forward. I was forced to redo the boundary 3 times, he said. Why? Because they found deposits, rare earth elements. The land was always private, and they wanted it back. Delaney Grant stepped next. She clicked through slides, wire transfers from shell companies to Cormarmac's PAC, emails between Fiona and foreign executives, surveillance logs from October 2019 showing the SUV circling my father's cabin in the weeks before he died. Fiona rose for cross-examination. Your evidence is circumstantial, she said, voice syrupy, fee-faw, with effort from her bulk cheeks red from anger and exertion. Delaney met her stare. Patterns are facts, ma'am. Surveillance, bribery, and theft coincidence. No. Intent. Clear intent, the room murmured. Cameras clicked. Fiona clenched papers in trembling hands. She wasn't prepared for all of this to hit at once in public. The defense tried procedural attacks. Thornton exceeded authority. Agreement was invalid. Wire transfers were legal political contributions. Judge Huxley leaned forward. If the BLM thought the agreement invalid in 2007, why wait 17 years to act silence? Thornton testified fully. Pierce corroborated. Delaney exposed the financial trail. I gave my own testimony, cabin break-in, media smear threats, and finally the reason I fought. Because my father kept his word, I said. Even when it cost him everything. Now the law must keep its word too. Fiona's cheeks burned red, her heavy frame shifting uneasily in the chair. She tried to argue one last time, voice strained, breath faux through clenched teeth, but the evidence was overwhelming. Judge Huxley closed the case file. Written decision in 72 hours. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. Fiona left silently, her leather briefcase swinging like a warning bell. The room felt electric, like the scales of justice had tipped with weight force and a story finally told. I sank back into the chair, hands on the podium. For the first time in months, I felt it, the land my father's legacy, the line he drew finally protected. But somewhere beyond the courthouse doors, I knew the fight wasn't over. Someone else was still counting stakes, still measuring, still watching, and the rare earth beneath my land, that was still worth a fortune. The war had just gone public. Back at the cabin, the Wyoming wind felt different. The fence posts, survey, stakes, and cedar rails marked the line I had defended. My father's line now legally confirmed mine. I ran my hands along the top wire, feeling the echo of his presence in every knot and twist. Ranchers from the county dropped by, quietly bringing coffee and sandwiches. No questions, no opinions, just respect. Some had been watching the trial on live streams, others followed the media storm. They nodded to me like we all understood the fight had been bigger than one family. It had been about who gets to decide the land and what kind of people get away with taking it. Emails and calls arrived from across the country, people who had lost similar battles. Some with tips, some with encouragement. One came from a retired FBI agent offering to provide an expert affidavit for any follow-up investigations. I realized my father's land wasn't just 640 acres of grass and sage. It was a symbol of patience, persistence, and standing for principle. Every ridge, every outcrop, every survey stake was a line drawn in the dirt, a boundary against greed. Sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, I watched a hawk circle the ridge. The wind stirred the sage like soft applause. For the first time, I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten. The legal fallout was swift. Wind River Resources dissolved entirely. Shell companies' unwound assets liquidated. Their stock plummeted. Fiona Kellerman disappeared from Wyoming. Her lobby license suspended, ethics under review. Her name vanished from federal filings and the courthouse, leaving only a reputation shredded under public scrutiny. Virgil Cormarmack resigned from the county commission, his campaigns under federal investigation for foreign influence and bribery. The defamation damages $500. 000 went into a legal aid fund I established to help other landowners facing similar battles. Cases poured in from across Wyoming, families being targeted, quiet, title actions, shell companies, corrupted officials. I shared what we had learned, document, photograph, call witnesses, hire experts, don't give in. Ramona Keys continued to represent me pro bono for related disputes. Delaney's investigation kept uncovering connections, shell corporations, foreign investors, financial manipulation. Every lead reinforced the lesson: the law could be used as a weapon, but it could also protect those who prepared and fought. I surveyed the property line again. Every post and wire, every marker now had legal teeth behind it. Anyone trying to cross it without authorization would face more than me. They'd face the weight of a system finally working. I made one final decision: the land would never be sold or exploited. I worked with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation to place a conservation easement on the property. The Travis Branson Memorial Land Trust was born 640 acres of sagegrass and rare earth deposits preserved forever. My father's stubbornness had protected it. Now, my law, patience, and foresight would continue the fight. Weeks later, 2 families in northern Wyoming contacted me. Their quiet title battles mirrored mine. I flew up to meet them in a barn outside Sheridan, showing them the strategy we had used. Be prepared for smears, I told them. They will try to break your credibility. They will use every resource to scare you. But if you document, if you fight, the law can protect you. One woman, hands, calloused eyes, sharp nodded. Was it worth it? I thought about the fence, the cabin, my father's grave overlooking the valley. Yes, I said. It was worth it. Back at the cabin, repaired doors, reinforced locks, and the new fence gleaming under the late autumn sun, the land was ours. I stood at the southern boundary hand on the top wire, watching the last light fade behind the Wind River Range. I remembered my father at 17 leaning against the fence. Eventually he had said, "You decide what you stand for." Now I did. I had drawn my line. And no helicopter, no HOA Karen, no corporation, no foreign shell company could ever cross it again. The wind swept across the prairie, quiet, endless, untouchable. And for the first time in my life, I knew my father had won, even in death. And now, so had I.